Um, perfect. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Today, as you can see, it's not Rachel, it's Claire. I am sitting in for Rachel, and you'll probably be seeing my face a lot more. Um, okay, so let me start by introducing myself again for people that did not get to interact with me the last time I was here. So I'm Claire. I am a researcher. I'm also project manager, but also I'm a podcaster. So I have a podcast called Spiritual Honesty, the podcast which talks about basically childhood traumas, mental health, but specifically childhood traumas. And then it also talks about the linkage that has to spirituality. Basically, the linkage, our life experiences, sometimes our suffering, sometimes our trauma has to finding what our purpose is in this life. It's also in a way to sort of draw um, or to basically understand one's experience better, not to be bitter about it, but understand how you can channel that energy into something more positive. Today, I want to talk about something that is, I guess, a little bit vulnerable. This is something that happened. This is something that happened this week. Um, so on Sunday, I I had to go volunteer for a friend who had a medical camp, and so I set off in the morning, and I just went met her. And when I did, so my friend is a little bit, not a little bit. My friend is spiritual. So she just looked at me once and she said, "What's wrong with you? What's going on?" And well, she's someone who knows me. She's my spiritual teacher. There's no point in lying to her. I did not know exactly what was wrong with me, but I did not feel like myself. And when I say I don't feel like myself, it means that I was starting to feel a little bit more depressed, and I was sort of leaning back or falling back on my own healing journey and going back to the level where I had not started therapy. And if anyone has started or has been on a healing journey, they will tell you that the feeling of falling back is not very painful per se, but it is not the best feeling because you know basically how it feels to not be okay, but also you experience bliss. You get to experience what it feels like to be okay. So when you start to feel yourself falling back, you can't get out of bed anymore, or it just feels like you're dragging yourself to get out of bed, and like there is nothing you could do about it. So for me, what was happening was, for like maybe a whole 3 weeks, I was doing a lot of sleeping, and because I remote work, I also was working from my bed. My laptop was just there, and I was doing the bare minimum. um I was sleeping a lot. I was not eating well. I'm a mom. I was also falling back on, you know, being a happy, present mom for my children. When they come back from school, I would, I had started to ask our household to let them know that I'm not yet back home so that I can just basically recollect myself. And I thought in the first weeks that this was something maybe I need to like rest it out, because when the body shows that it wants to rest, you have to listen to it. So I was like, I'll rest it out and then I'll feel okay. And then it just continued happening. It just continued happening until I basically did not have any more control over it. And I just started to feel my self-esteem drop. I started to feel my self-confidence drop. I started to start being very forgetful. So those, for me, those are usually the signs that I'm going back. When I meet people and I'm even scared to like talk to them, I'm going back to my introvert ways. When I have to like go to an event and I don't want to, just because I don't want to interact with people, I usually like interacting with people. So when it feels like it's, I can't talk, I don't feel confident to talk to people, it's bad. So she gave me one look, and she said, no, you're not okay. So let's go for this medical camp, and then you will come and we shall talk about it. We shall basically see what is going on, right? And it's like, yeah, yeah, for sure. So on Wednesday, I went and saw her. This will be a bit personal, but what is healing when you can't be personal and vulnerable, right? So on Wednesday, I go and saw her, and there are two things that we talked about. The first thing, the thing was abuse. The general thing was abuse, but it was under two brackets, right? And the first one was abuse at work, and the second one was childhood trauma. So abuse by parents. The first thing we talked about, of course, was abuse at work, because I had been working in a toxic environment a bit of last year and early this year. And, you know, for anyone that has worked in a toxic environment, I don't know if the feeling is true for everyone, but for me, because I'm usually very connected to myself as a result of, healing and working on myself and understanding my emotions and feelings, I usually, of course, can tell when it's all falling apart. So, because I'm usually very connected, because of the way my work was, I had started to disconnect from myself, right? So it's as if, you have your body here, and then your head is somewhere hanging around your body, but those two are not really interconnected. So that means there's a lot of disorganization in the way you're doing things. And my work was the kind of work, it was remote with a little bit of physical engagements here and there, but also the schedule was crazy. And so I would wake up in the morning and have to work, and then I would sleep. I would probably rest like at about 5. I didn't have a maid, so also child keeping was there. So the kids go to sleep, and then you go back to the laptop, and then you sleep maybe like at midnight, and then you when you sleep, you sort of dream work, because the next day, if you work with people that are not, no, not, but like, if you have encountered a toxic boss, you know that you just never know what mood they're going to be in the next day. And so I would sleep, but I was always like pre-worried about work and about the mood of my boss that I'm going to find her in the next day, which was very confusing, because sometimes she would be in a really, really good mood, and I'd be like, "Ooh, that's amazing. Okay, that's amazing." And then sometimes she would be in a bad mood. Now, anyone who understands emotional abuse, that confusion is one of the ways that it happens, because there is positive and also negative things happening, and you just never know what you're going to deal with at any point. So you have to always like adjust yourself. And I think also the thing about work is, because you're paid, it's not a situation where you feel like, okay, I'll leave tomorrow. Like, it's not a situation where you you sort of get to set this strong boundary that if you talk to me this way, I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to talk to you anymore, because you have to earn money at the end of the day. And in my country, in Uganda, there's a lot of joblessness, a lot of youth unemployment. And so a lot of employers know that one person will leave and they'll get another one tomorrow for even probably less money. So employers are not very employers know that they can always replace you immediately. It is a general truth for work, to be honest, but in a country like ours where many young people leave university and they stay unemployed for like many years, so there's a lot of job competition, and employers know this, of course. So that makes the abuse so apparent because you will be abused, but to make the decision to leave would be hard because you need to survive. So I had been in such a toxic environment that I lost a bit of myself. And when eventually that job ended, when I basically lost my job, I remember feeling relief, but also I also remember being very scared because I was not exactly aware of, how am I going to survive? I have children, I'm a single parent, how am I going to survive? So it was like a very scary, but also very, very fulfilling moment because I was happy finally I was free. But shortly after that, anyone that has either lost a job or has quit a job or whatever has resigned knows that there's usually some compensation that is made, and some bosses don't like to pay, especially when someone has left. It's like chapter close and everything. Um, but I had to use every means necessary to get that payment for my compensation done, which put me in a conflicting position with my former boss. And so we did a lot of back and forth, emails, back and forth, sometimes fighting, sometimes threatening, sometimes just talking until that payment was done. It probably took about, because I lost my job in February and I got paid in May, so it took about 3 months for me to get that payment made. But I'm talking about 3 months of back and forth, and that is energy being exchanged. You're exchanging bad energy because there is like anger, there is fury, there is all these, So that was a lot of energy I was using. And also, I'm not really a person that is good with confrontation. So, of course, that affected me, up until the point when I got my compensation done or made. But of course, life moves on. You have to grind on, move on, and look for more work. So, of course, you move on. I'm a busy person. I have my kids. I have to stay strong. I don't think I got the opportunity to, what's the word, to reflect and to assess how much that experience affected my psyche. I did not. I knew that the environment had not been good. I thought that the moment I left, I'm gonna feel better. I'm usually talking about self love. I'm usually talking about boundaries. I'm usually talking about also God doesn't put you in situations that you're not going to get out of. And so I see everything as a positive step in a new direction, in a more as welcoming new experiences. So I guess maybe I gaslit myself like that I was okay. So I did not get the opportunity to grieve or to grieve the loss of my job. I didn't get the opportunity to check in with my emotions. I just moved on to new things. Um, so when I was talking to my friend, and I've talked about it like that because in the conversation with my friend that came up, my that experience left me broken, extremely, extremely broken. And I didn't get that chance to provide my body or to provide my brain with the opportunity to, I guess, heal from it and cleanse and protect myself, you know. Um, and it affected eventually how I was showing up in the other spaces of my other professional spaces, because the former experience affected my self-esteem so much. It affected my self-confidence so much. I did not know how it's going to be in new work environments. And so I purposely did not apply for jobs. And for a long time, I was telling myself that I'm just resting because, you know, I've worked for so many years and I've not got the opportunity to rest. And and that I'm using this time to basically rest. My friends would send me a lot of job opportunities that they could tell that I qualify for and I could do very well, and I would not apply. I realized later that I was not applying because, and when I say later, I mean Wednesday when I went to see my friend. I realized that I was not applying for these jobs because I was not feeling confident. And that was as a result of the way my former job left me. And I thought, okay, that's actually very insane because that's true. And a situation, if I don't look at the situation very critically, I could actually stay unemployed for a long time because I'm scared, because because of a situation that happened, you know, um, that affected the way I saw myself, you know, that affected the way I thought about myself, that affected my spirituality, that affected everything about me, you know. Um, the other second thing was about childhood trauma, and I hope you guys are following. I like to talk because I love to give context. Um, but the second thing was about childhood trauma. I have a podcast, like I said earlier, called Spiritual Honesty, the podcast, which basically talks about childhood trauma. And the reason why I started that podcast was because I have suffered childhood trauma myself. And to reach a point in my life where I can comfortably recognize and even identify with someone who has childhood trauma, it took a while, and I'll explain why later. But my abuse essentially, of course, happened when I was a child through, you know, the early years and then through the teenage years and a little bit of the adult years, you know. So it's a lot of stuff to unpack. And I've been in therapy for 2 years now. And I thought that I had a good grip on this because when I started my therapy journey, the first time I started therapy, or the first time I basically started to be very intentional about healing. And that meant, you know, I tried therapy, I tried spirituality, I tried reading, journaling, I tried other alternatives like yoga, mindfulness, meditation, you name it. I am a girl who tries everything. I even wear crystals, you know, anything that will make me, or anything that I feel would work for me. You know, I've tried it because I am that, or I was that hungry for healing. I remember asking my therapist, I think in the past session, whether there are people who truly feel happy, like generally. And he said, you'll be surprised at how many they are. And I thought that was a joke because I didn't know what it was like to be okay. And then at some point, I felt okay. One day like this, I felt fine. I woke up and I felt so much light in my heart, in my chest, in my body. I was so happy. And I was like, oh my God, this is how it feels. Absolute bliss. And then I felt it, I was like, everybody that has suffered, everybody that is depressed and they're going through something, I just want them to know that you can get out of this. Because I had gotten out of this. If I could get out of that, anyone I felt could get out of that, you know? And so, obviously, being an advocate for whatever it is, I started to talk about mental health. I started to talk about healing. I started to talk about childhood traumas. I started to talk about spirituality. And also, finding, um, rooting myself in spirituality was also another thing that helped to ground me and connect me, I guess, to myself. And that is something that I was also strongly preaching. So, what I'm trying to say is that I got tools. I started to know how to regulate my own emotions. For a long time, nothing would actually phase me because you see, the world is like full of very many problematic things. It's just problematic, And I made the choice to look at life differently, and that was going well for me. But when I was having that conversation with my friend on Wednesday, he then mentioned that you're losing yourself so much that it is not probably, that it is showing in your podcast as well. It is, you are deviating from the purpose of that podcast. Can you see that? And I could see it because it was a very intentional decision I made to deviate. And I told her, I know why I deviated from that. And she said, why? Why did you? And I told her that in a way, I am judging myself for my trauma. And she said, what do you mean? And I said that when when I was experiencing the experiences I had as a child, the thing that I remember, my mom and my uncle, so that people who used to, you know, I will use the word abuse me. The thing they would say a lot was that I was a difficult child, which meant in a way that I deserved the way I was being treated. I deserved the beatings, I deserved the abuses, the curses, I deserved the pain. My mom also used to find joy in finding me in wrong. So all the time she was always trying to look for something bad. So I developed this feeling that I was always in wrong, you know, and every day was essentially me walking on eggshells because I could chew the wrong way and that would be bad. I was going to be punished. I could walk the wrong way. I could talk to the wrong person, you know. I could put on socks at school the wrong way, and my uncle would be so mad. He would call my mom, and then my mom would be like, beat her. And then he would be like, yay, beat her. And then I'll be beaten, and shamed and all that. But never once did I think that I did not deserve to be beaten because I thought I was a bad child. And so it was difficult to even get to the point where I can allow myself to believe that actually I was abused and traumatized as a child because I was still judging myself. Even when I started to talk about it more, I felt like everybody I was telling was looking at me and saying, stop being a crybaby, you're just a bad child, you know. So so when I told her that I am judging myself and that's why I don't want to go back to the root of my podcast, that's why I am bringing in so many other people as guests, so that the focus is not on me. I don't have to be vulnerable on my own podcast. I don't have to talk about in detail my trauma. I don't have to share in detail my story because maybe people would judge me. Maybe they would see that I deserved the experiences that I got. And maybe they would see that for some reason I shouldn't even be talking about what I'm talking about because I was a bad child. So having other people and having the focus on them helped with that. But you see what it sort of does to me. And I think the pain it sort of causes to my cause is that it takes away the authenticity I started with. If anyone is here listening, maybe I would urge you to just go to my podcast and listen to my very first episode, you know? And that very first episode was my why for starting the podcast. I wanted to use my story to help anyone that was going through such a difficult time. I wanted to use my story of trauma, and I wanted to use my story of healing, and I wanted to use my story of spiritual awakening to help anyone that was struggling, to help anyone that was essentially losing hope that they can't beat this thing, that they can't feel better, you know? So I basically got into a very mini therapy session with my friend, with my spiritual teacher. And I started crying like a child. And she was just looking at me like this. She was like, it's okay, you can cry. There I was at 30 years, seated in a friend's chair, thinking that I have done so much work, I have healed, I'm okay. But I was seated and crying over things that happened to me when I was 9 years old. I was seated crying over things that happened when I was a teenager, crying over things that happened when I was 20, when I was, you see, I was crying. All the trauma just came back. And you see, in the 3 weeks that I was earlier talking about where I was losing myself, what had actually happened was I had fallen back. I had started getting flashbacks of, of the major pain points of my life. And I went into a proper self pity mode. Why me? I was just a child. That is not supposed to happen to me. But the idea or the issue is that I'm also usually very self aware. I could feel that going on. But my friends believe that I'm a very strong person. I can pep talk myself out of anything. I can pep talk my friends out of anything. So I gaslit myself and I was telling myself basically, I should not feel that. I felt it, I should not feel that. I shouldn't feel that pain. It is gone. It is gone. Let bygones be bygones, you know? And spiritually, they tell us you are what you attract, what you think about, you know. So if I essentially just went back into my brain to just entertain traumatic experiences, that's what I was essentially going to attract. But you see, that was not taking away the actual experience of pain that I had. And yes, in therapy, I was able to scratch all the surfaces of my trauma. But healing them completely, that's not the thing that had happened. And I don't think that's a thing that can ever happen. And maybe it's even painful to actually appreciate that at some point it's probably not going to happen where my trauma doesn't feel painful, or my experiences don't pain me anymore, because basically you experience those things. But there was a trigger, which is the very important thing here. So you see, I always like to say my mom is my abuser. And I can say that very comfortably now because I think if I don't say it, I may never just get over it. I may never just believe it. You see, I usually used to envy people that that were abused, but their abusers were technically people that are not supposed to love them. It's easier to let go of that. If your abuser is some random guy you found somewhere, does not really reduce the amount of your pain, but it sort of it doesn't reduce the amount of your pain, but it doesn't make it so much when your abuser is your parent, the person who gave birth to you, the person who created you and brought you to this earth. It is the person who, after beating you, they are the same person that are supposed to give you food. So you rely on them to survive. And so as a child, of course, you develop some coping mechanisms where you can't see your abuser as your abuser. They feed you, you also appreciate them as parents, so you love them. And also you can feel that they love you, but they abuse you as well, which is very confusing. So my mom had done a thing where she invited us home, all her kids. We are very alienated, not in touch much, especially for me. I'm the firstborn, I experience that side a lot more. She's not willing to recognize the pain she put us through. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to engage that much, but you're my mom. I love you. I also see where you came from, but I don't have to be present a lot. So when she called us, we went. We thought it was a meeting, but my mom had invited us to pray for us. And during the prayer session, which lasted about 4 hours, the final ritual, sorry, my beautiful Christians, but the final ritual was basically for her to lay hands on all her kids and say prayers. She came to me first, obviously, as her firstborn, laid hands on me and said, God, I pray for my daughter to stop doing this, to stop doing that, to get a husband, to get married. She's a single mom. I pray for that to go away, and so many other things. But why I am just saying to do this and that is I can't really go in detail, purposes of protecting, I guess, myself and people I love. But I remember being very angry because what my mom was doing right there just a few weeks ago or a month ago was something she had done when I was still a child. It was something that she used to do, like bring us into this prayer or whatever belief system thing. And she gets us to pray about ridiculous things that don't even exist and shame us because the things she was praying against were things that were not true for me. It was like a confrontation of sorts, but in front of everybody, and it was shameful. I remember leaving home feeling very angry. Of course, I didn't confront her, but I was very angry. I told my friends about it. I was laughing about them, but I was very angry. It is only in the session on Wednesday with my friend where we actually established that I was abused again. My mom, even at 30, abused me again. My mom put me in front of a circle and said words and said things about me in front of everybody that were not even true for me. She shamed me again the way she used to shame me as a child. And I was wondering, why am I having these flashbacks of all these painful stories from my childhood? Why am I going back to these places? I've left these places alone, but I was re-triggered. And I did not recognize that, unfortunately, until Wednesday. I didn't recognize that some parents don't change their ways, and that sometimes you may have to sacrifice a relationship with your parent just so you can be okay. Because, see, I went back, I got depression again, I got suicidal again because I was re-triggered. And that moment on Wednesday for me was so profound. It was a reminder to set boundaries. It was a reminder to love the people from a distance. It was a reminder to accept my reality. It was a reminder to cut off certain people because they're just not good for my soul. And it's painful because some of these people are people that we should technically love. So yeah, since Wednesday, I've been trying to reparent myself. I've been trying to have more compassion for myself. I don't want to be aggressive with myself and forcing myself to heal or to not remember or to not feel. I am sleeping minimally. I am trying to exercise. I'm trying to eat well, to drink water, catch up with friends. I am trying to love on my children as much as I should. I'm trying to do small, subtle things that will eventually bring me back to myself. But I'm also trying to create boundaries. I thought that if I had this conversation and as honestly as it was, as honestly as it should be, as vulnerably, maybe I could find my own healing for that particular situation. But I also hope that this conversation finds someone who probably wants to hear it. And maybe what I say is exactly what they needed to hear. Whew. Having said that, thank you for watching. Thank you for sitting through this with me. I appreciate it. I really, 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 really appreciate it. If you want to engage, if you want to reach out, you can just, go on IG, look for Spiritual Honesty, the podcast. You can go to TikTok, look for Spiritual Honesty, the podcast. You can also leave me a message on either of those platforms. We are on Spotify, we are on YouTube, we are on Apple Podcasts, we are on Google Podcasts as Spiritual Honesty, the podcast, if you want to listen to some of the episodes that we have put up. All right. Thank you so much for listening, if you are, and for watching, if you are. Bye.